Vedius is sent packing. Now G2 in a 4v5 have to find a way to fight back, but Ayoya will not give them that opportunity. It's a beautiful fight.
They will knock G2 down.
Definitely a big disappointment going up against Matt. Definitely wanted to win and secure Munich. I think we were lacking a lot of confidence for sure. On draft, they were catching us off guard, so we get a chance to really figure out this patch.
GX can pop off in some moments. I think one of our strengths is our drafting. People don't usually expect what you're gonna play. We can be one of the surprises in the tournament. When I am under pressure, I tend to focus a bit more.
He flashes for Jackie does as well. He flies through, he electrocutes, he finds a breathing line in the middle of the fight, and Wonder comes in late. But man, with a quadra kill out when they needed him most, Jackie's fly.
If we wanna win this whole thing, we just have to use our strengths and just outsmart enemies.
We're gonna come from the lower bracket. We're gonna take it home all the way.
Well, here we are to see if G2 will make the lower bracket run once again, or whether GIANTX will bring us the upset of the year, I would say, in the LEC if they manage to take down G2, and also make Worlds qualification very easy for the rest of our teams in our bracket. If G2 are knocked out today, whoever makes finals, whoever goes to the grand finals of the season finals in Munich will be going to Worlds alongside. Not a bad place to be.
Certainly the case. We haven't seen GIANTX for a while now. Did fall short during the summer split playoffs. But mainly, I think coming into this series, a lot of eyes are on G2. They will be representing us already at the World Championship, as Mikyx has already highlighted. And so expectations are naturally very high. As a World's representative, Europe wants to see them dominate today, and GIANTX are going to be looking to try and put a stop to that.
Yeah, a lot of question marks raised, though, on G2 after the performance against MDK. With MDK being able to take them in that game 5, a lot of people were disappointed in the performance we saw from G2. So I think today is about trying to come back in and silence a lot of those doubters and show that G2 is still the best team in the LEC.
Last time we saw a huge priority on the Kennen for G2. I wonder if that's going to stay the same, especially when we know the type of champions that the Antonio is willing to bring out himself. On top of that, Vi was something that G2 really valued, and MDK found effective answers with things like the Morgana. GIANTX will likely have studied that series in depth and found their own solutions, and already when we get into the draft, we can see the Kennen being taken away from G2.
Yeah, it feels like G2 trying to force us back in towards, you know, the Maokai and the Sejuani picks here, and it's been something where we've seen the Amumu come out for Juhan in that kind of meta, so I am curious to see if that is the tank jungle meta we're going to be forcing ourselves into, or whether Yike is willing to go back towards the carries.
There's the Ziggs band away. The Antonio has been spamming that in solo queue, so G2 doing their due diligence, have been doing their research before the series. We'll get rid of the Ziggs top, Renekton, Kennen band away alongside the Nidalee and the Vi. A lot of those power picks still available though. MF, Ezreal, both still up for these teams. Zeri as well, something we've seen banned out quite a lot over the last few weeks. Aatrox, the final ban, and from the way Dylan's laughing, I think perhaps BrokenBlade has been playing that a little bit in solo queue as well.
I imagine that they're banning that because they want an Ornn.
Yep.
And they know that BrokenBlade usually uses this as an answer to it. You have to imagine that Misfortune is going to be the first pick from G2. It has been a perma red side ban in Europe. So, but G2 saying, you know what, our priorities are slightly different. Instead, they're going to lock in the Ashe. We've seen Han Summer play a bunch of this during the summer split. So you imagine that this is going to go into the AD carry position, but there's always the possibility of it flexing to support as well.
Yeah, I think either way, it's just incredibly strong. The ultimate being able to set up for picks in the early stages is super nice, especially when you're able to toss those towards the mid lane. And when a lot of these mid lane matchups are incredibly volatile, where you're looking at double AD carries, it just means that that can easily then snowball into mid lane just being completely under control. Maokai going to be taken on the opposite side though, which I do like, because again, Jackie's has been able to bring out a lot of things like the Yone and these kind of AD mid laners that a lot of other mid lane pool hasn't picked up.
Alongside the Maokai will be the Rell for IgNar, something we saw Mikyx bring out 4 times in their series against Mad Lions Koi. However, Ezreal and Zeri, still both possibilities. Misfortune as well, if we want to go for double AD carries, we could see a Zeri, Ezreal mid, and then that Misfortune picked up maybe later for GIANTX.
Curious if we want to go for the Braum here as well, just to try and deny the Rell engage, and then take something like the Sejuani just to match in the jungle, although looks immediately like they're going to go towards the Ivern, so definitely going to play a little bit more of a squishy composition, it feels like, with Ivern trying to provide that AP damage for what I assume will be an AD mid lane.
Yeah, I wonder if AD mid is what they're thinking about. Right now it's looking like the Braum. there's two factors here. First, into Maokai, very effective. Also, pretty solid matchup into the Rell. But it pushes the Antonio away from any potential on top lane picks. We'll see whether or not he still fancies his chances with that pick. Cheeky hover over the Neela, something that Patrik has played many times before. Something that he's very experienced on. But it's going to be the Zeri. Makes a huge amount of sense, very strong in the current meta, can also be flexed into both mid and AD carry, something that G2 will have to respect, given that GIANTX, I mean, in the highlight reel coming into this, we already saw Jackie's pop-off performance on the champion earlier this split.
Yeah, Jackie's has to be somewhere our eyes are fixed for this series for GIANTX. Eragon was talking about how they traditionally go 3 tanks, 2 carries. Jackie's has so consistently been the carry for GIANTX, and as a squad that hasn't placed anywhere higher than 6th this year, if they're going to get farther in the season finals, a lot of the weight of expectation will be on Jackie's shoulders.
Mid lane party now for the bans from GIANTX, trying to force away from the Azir, which does work well with the Ivern, even in the AP, just because that attack speed means you can get value out of the shields that the Ivern brings along. But I am curious if we end up seeing more like Lucian mid here for Caps. I think it's something that's just incredibly strong, and or even the Corki, because I feel like you still are fine to go with these AD mid laners, but I think the main question for me is what does BrokenBlade take on the top side?
I think the question also is, will Caps actually go towards those AD mid laners? Because last time against MDK, he didn't play a single AD mid throughout the course of that 5-game series. It felt like G2 had settled on this. We're going to play majors mid-draft. We're going to dive onto the MDK backline here. We do see the Tristana banned away by GIANTX, but as you say, Lucian's still there, Ezreal's still there for Caps if he wants an AD in mid.
I think it's also just like we saw G2 going for a lot of the Aurora bans as well, so it kind of felt like they just weren't comfortable with an understanding of the new meta coming into this. So I think that is a question of like, how do they then approach this new draft? Ezreal taking on the opposite side of the bot lane, but
and Aurora obviously globally disabled at the moment because of some issues regarding chrono breaks when she is in the game, so that's why we haven't been seeing it banned out across the course of this weekend. There's the Ezreal though for GIANTX, still flexibility as to whether the Zeri is mid or that Ez is going mid, or even something like a Zeri top is a possibility. Not something I would expect that much from the Antonio, but we have seen it in other regions.
Cassante plus Corki probably makes the most sense here. They can also do Smolder. We've been seeing it pop up. We even saw it yesterday. As you mentioned, Dagda, rookie, someone that's been a big advocate of the champion. In mid lane, relatively safe, good scaling, offers this huge late game threat, and when you have Braum plus an Ivern, you have a huge amount of peel and protection for your AD carries. I would argue that G2's composition is somewhat limited in terms of its engage, with Braum as your primary support. He doesn't have the strongest tools to actually start a fight. However, the pick potential on G2 is very high. They have a lot of single target CC when you think about Braum passive, Ashe, Arrow, the Ivern Q, all sorts of tools to be able to lock down a single target. I will also say that their composition loves it when the enemy runs into them. However, GIANTX have a decent amount of range at their disposal. They have both the Zeri and the Ezreal. The truth is, gentlemen, I think this is going to be a relatively slow game. AD carries across the board, a tank matchup on the top side, 2 utility junglers with, well, supports. So very much focused around team fights, very much focused around scaling, and it's going to come down to execution around these neutral objectives.
Yeah, I'm really curious how G2 do try and set up for fights, because a huge amount of it feels like it's on Hansama's ult or the Q from Ivern to try and set them up. But if that misses, or you know, you've got to cleanse in the right time, it feels like for G2 it's kind of impossible to get these fights up and rolling. So GIANTX get that opportunity to try and scale, but I think that's where G2 are hoping that this Smolder can beat them out in that regard.
Yeah, Ivern with 2 AD carries as well as the game goes on is going to scale very well. The Ezreal and the Zeri for GIANTX will have a lot of power as the game goes on as well. As you say, Vedi, does feel like it's going to be a little bit of a slower game, not as much explosiveness from either of these compositions. I had a look back through Patrik's history on the Ezreal. It's something we've seen him play a lot of times. In fact, his second most played across the course of his career, but has lost about 75% of the games that he has played on it over 27 games. And obviously Patrik has been on teams that have failed, so it's not always an indictment on how good he is on the champion, but he really wants to show in this game that he can land that poke, that he can land those Qs and whittle G2 down before the fight begins.
We're getting ready for game 1 of this best of 5. The winner will make their way onto the next round of the season finals to face up against BDS next week. The loser will be eliminated. And in the case of G2, if they are in fact eliminated, they will still make their way towards the World Championships. Unfortunately for GIANTX, it's kind of all or nothing here today. And I think coming in, we can all set our expectations that even after G2's recent performances, they're still the heavy favorites in today's best of 5. So it's on GIANTX to show us what they've been preparing, what they've got. And so far in terms of the draft, it looks like that they haven't showed us anything too crazy, which could be a good thing for them, considering they're sticking to the style that they've been able to find some degree of success with, and they're going into a composition that is very similar to their own.
Yeah, especially when GIANTX have still shown that they struggle in the mid-game. Even when they can find early success, it's someone getting caught out, they're not in the right position, and they end up throwing away those leads. So I think there's a lot of question marks around how GIANTX even approach their mid-game. And especially against a team like G2, they are still very good at punishing that. We still saw remnants of that against MDK. So for GIANTX, it is definitely an uphill battle. And it looks like they may have opted out of some of the battles as the Antonio is sitting on this bottom side. It might be a lane swap we're looking at.
I mean, it's definitely going to be a lane swap, isn't it? You can see IgNar and Patrik walking in here, trying to put some pressure down onto Yike, who did place that ward as he poked his nose in early doors. So IgNar and Patrik will be aware that Yike started on this bottom side. You can see on the camp that Ivern passive built up. Antonio's going to have to deal with some 2v1 pressure in the bottom lane. And actually looks like Patrik might be sent on his lonesome to face up against BrokenBlade. Hansummer chipping away at the Antonio, kind of to be expected. The wave will slowly push towards the Giant side of the map.
We'll see how well this lane swap pays off for GIANTX. You've got to remember that it's a scary thing to do, given the current balance of the game, given that the bot tower just kind of melts, whereas the top tower is very resistant. Juhan going to use the swap to take advantage and steal away these topside camps. Yike. I wonder how much knowledge he has of this, because obviously he's seen the swap now. He knows that those bot camps of GIANTX should still be available.
Yeah, I think Yike's aware. I think he just spotted Maokai on a ward that was placed in River, and you could even see he was thinking of going into his top side to try and steal that camp away after seeing the lane swap, but decided against it when he realized his health bar was a little low. So Juhan going to be able to steal away this top side, but I imagine Yike is just going to respond in kind by moving into this bot side and getting camps of his own.
IgNar's here to cover the dive, but G2 should be aware that IgNar hasn't shown anywhere on the map as of yet, so even though he's been out of vision, the dive would be a little precarious for them. They're going to look for it anyway. No one tanking the tower as of yet. Antonio hits the level 2. IgNar shows his face and should be able to clear up these minions underneath the turret. Yike will be able to path into this blue side to steal away a couple of these camps, although Juhan did take the wolves on his first clear.
BrokenBlade's a little far up, though. He ended up pushing the wave in the top side. You can see where Juhan has put his attention. He might be able to get something.
BrokenBlade's already popped the ghost. He's going to try and escape. And the top lane manages to dash away. So he does use a summoner, but it still holds on to his life.
I will say I'm curious as to what the game plan here is for GIANTX, because if we're only 3 minutes in, of course, but if we kind of take stock real quick, Ezreal's getting isolated experience, sure, that's cool, but BrokenBlade isn't really being denied anything, whereas Antonio is losing out on a lot of farm. He's at the risk of getting dived once again. Yike is still hovering around the bot side of the map. They're being very cautious. Look, this wave will hit at just the right time, so now G2 can stack up another wave to threaten another dive.
And it's even if you don't get the dive, you're still getting plates for Hansummer.
Yeah.
So in the grand scheme of things, it's working out wonderfully for you. So I agree with you, Vedi. I'm not really sure what the thought process is from GIANTX.
Nor am I. Guys, we're all on the same page that we're not quite sure what page GIANTX currently sit on. Wave shoved out by Patrik could just be, of course, to avoid the early pressure that Hans and Mikyx can put down on Patrik and IgNar, maybe get him towards the level 3, level 4, and then he can path back down towards this bottom side. But as I say that, looks like he's opening up top. Could play around the grubs in a minute and a half time. Antonio will be able to catch this wave under the turret. G2 look like they're going to head back down to the bottom side, so not going to match IgNar and Patrik in top lane. I mean,
I guess that's probably the most compelling reason. They just wanted to avoid the 2 versus 2. They wanted to allow Patrik to, at the very least, get good farm. And you kind of look at the bot lane, there's only 100 gold difference, and there's a whole wave for Patrik to still to catch in top.
And Patrik is a whole level ahead, which is about, if I remember correctly, about 400 to 600 gold worth of stats in and of itself. So if you are going to contest around the grubs, if you are going to look for these early plays, then getting your Ezreal to a position where he's a level ahead of his opponent is a benefit.
And, I mean, they haven't lost anything, like aside from a few plates to the bot side of the map, so the bot lane dive never really came through from G2. So yeah, okay, I mean, there's no detriment so far shown to the swap at the very least.
I think the biggest problem is going to come in the next few minutes where, say you try and go for Void Grubs for GIANTX, but having this Ezreal on the top side, you go for the dive on towards bot lane, and even if you don't, you can start to get another 2 plates off the back of that play, or even maybe look for a full turret take, and you just don't have that same threat because you haven't got any damage, and suddenly you're losing map state already at this portion of the game, which opens up Mikyx to start to roam. I think that's where GIANTX are going to start to struggle, is if G2 just get map control off of this position.
For the moment, looks like Juhan's just going to use the fact he has a numbers advantage on the top side to start up those grubs. It's about a 500 gold difference between the two teams. You can see BrokenBlade and Yike at 150 to 200 ahead of their opponents. Yike's now pathing down towards the bot side. Could look for a dive on the Antonio, who's about a quarter of the way to that level 6.
And this is the play I was talking about. As soon as you show up towards that top side, they look for the dive, and now you're going to start to fall behind.
IgNar's making his way down here, but not going to be there too quickly. The wave arriving means that Mikyx can't hit a Winter's Bite. Now gets the first stack of those concussive blows, staggering blows in fact, and they'll lose a plate, but with the minion wave dying off, the Antonio should be fine underneath the turret for now.
He's completely fine. Grubs secured, resets come through. Notice IgNar's now made his way back to bot, which makes the dive much harder, the level 6 as well. Yeah, I mean, Hans.
Caps in the mid lane, Lightning Crash coming out. Caps does still have the flash to try and avoid this, puts down the Mom to try and call for a little bit of aid. Jackie's flash away, the level up! Just in time there for Jackie's, gets him over to level 7. Both the mid laners flashless now as Yike comes to help out Caps. True Shot Barrage going wide.
That was a tense moment. Now the Antonio looking for a fight.
Mikyx stunned into the wall, has the flash, puts the Ignite down onto the Antonio, who flashes away, as does IgNar. There's the first bit of CC, and IgNar is going to pay for Antonio's dive in with his life, and the Antonio might be soon to follow. G2 find their first kill, and the first kill of the game.
I just want to confirm, the Antonio picked that fight, right? Yeah. He was like, we're going in. Yeah, that was not the best of decisions, and now he's all on his lonesome in this bottom side. And
no TP to keep his verdict. Is it enough? Can he helicopter his way out of this one? The answer is an emphatic no. G2 get their second.
Now, that was quite a big misplay, because what was a relatively even early game is now going to explode massively in favor of G2. TP going to be committed by the Antonio to try and catch bot wave, but Ansama's going to secure another plate. He secured himself first blood. BrokenBlade now could be the one in danger.
Ghosts immediately as soon as he sees Juhan coming across that ward. IgNar here to help out, but the ward will be cleared and BrokenBlade still escapes.
Yeah, I think they had to pull away there because there's always an opportunity for BrokenBlade to ult Juhan through the wall and then just having that isolated 1v1 where honestly you probably could pick off Juhan if he had enough time. So just going to back away from that one, and Ghost burnt, not the end of the world. G2 still coming out on top.
I will say that, like, I think they should have just swapped back. Like,
yeah,
isn't Poppy a good matchup into Cassandre?
Yeah, it was what we saw at MSI. Oscar Winning cracked it out to try and win those matchups.
And, I mean, now you can see that he's what, 20 CS down, he's died once, he uses the ultimate to just be annoying to Caps, which, you know, I mean, I think he succeeded in that front. I mean, again, like, when you look at the grand scheme of things, sure, it's not that dramatic, right? The goal difference isn't too crazy, but the problem is that when you have two scaling compositions, it kind of becomes this race of who reaches their breakpoints faster, and you've just accelerated G2. So now, coming into the next Dragon, G2's likely to have those first items completed, whereas you're still in the components phase.
But it's also the weaknesses we've seen from G2 have been their early game, so opting out of that does seem a little bizarre. Now, GIANTX aren't the best in the early stages, like they do average a deficit when it comes to the 14-minute mark, but still, if you're going to fight them, it feels like the early game is really where you want to try and put blood in the water against G2.
For the moment, GIANTX have been unable to find any blood. IgNar's looking for some down towards the bottom lane. Cap still no flash, can flap his way away from the fight for now. Mikyx here to defend him. Mom, well, it's called and is able to clear out the wave.
Or at least the plate is secured for GIANTX.
But I think for GIANTX, a lot of the weight is on Jackie's in the mid lane. The only guy, if you look down at the bottom of the scoreboard with that red number next to his name, he's been so consistently a carry for this team. The question is, can he step up here against G2?
Well, he's going to have to. As you already highlighted, a lot of the carry responsibility typically falls onto his and Patrik's shoulders, and with a composition like this, his positioning is going to be crucial. I think Zeri can still 1v9 games, especially in compositions like this. Obviously, one of the big differences is that G2's carries have a lot more peel.
Yeah.
Like a lot more. While GIANTX's kind of, while they offer peel, like Maokai can offer good peel as well, it's a different type of, like, it's like a protection rather than a utility based, whereas both the Braum shield just mitigates damage along with the shield mitigates damage, and so this front to back is going to be interesting, because I do think the GIANTX do have a slightly squishier front line.
For the moment, no fighting occurring, only those 2 kills in the bottom lane for G2. The Drake secured as well by Yike. GIANTX, I mean, they might as well be seeing Deadpool and Wolverine with how much cinema is happening in front of their faces.
I mean, they're going to get pushed here in mid for G2 as well, so I wouldn't even be surprised if they want to try and lean over for Void Grubs, but they want to try and establish themselves on this bottom side, prevent the push from Jackies, and deny at least a play that GIANTX could try and set up on towards Caps.
Perhaps are up. No one really seems to be interested in them whatsoever right now, though.
It's so often we've seen G2 kind of just end up with these isolated towers for little reason, right? Like, you're setting up there for Ashe, but here comes the play.
Nature's Grasp onto Mikyx. He flashes, stand beside Yike, and escapes. So, you get the flash out of the Braum, but not too much more there for GIANTX.
And now they're just going to roam down onto the bottom side, because GIANTX have all moved to defend the mid lane turret because they were in an awkward spot. So G2 going to move down now and try and finish off that last remaining turret plate, potentially take bot tower and give it to Caps.
I guess G2 is saying that we're happy to sacrifice Grubs in exchange for the bot tier 1. But GIANTX is actually just focused on clearing their bot side camps and have no interest, which means that you now have this kind of standoff. But looking at this tower, I don't think there's really much for GIANTX to defend. I would argue that they're overcapitalizing on... Ooh, Jackies. Yeah, I think they're overcapitalizing on an objective that there's not much that they can really do about. That's usually why the response to a situation like this is fine, we'll trade. If we're going to lose that tower anyway, we may as well get something back for it. But they're not getting anything back for it. They're just kind of watching their towers slowly die.
GIANTX kind of just got caught, where it was like, hey, we want to look at Dragon. The way we enter in through Dragon Pit is we have push on bot, so let's move to the bottom side of the map. But then that opened up for Hansama to get push in mid and make it really difficult then for GIANTX to contest the mid wave. So they have to hard push in towards the mid side, which means G2 then just get control over the bot push. So GIANTX are kind of just trying to do too much and defend too many areas rather than just coming up with a solid game plan in advance and saying, hey, we're going to forego Dragon, put pressure mid, or forego Dragon and get Void Grubs and put pressure top. It's just in an awkward situation for them.
I like what G2 is doing here by just sending their support and jungle to the bot side of the map, knowing that that tower is an easy objective. Also, they watched Juhan clear those bot camps, so you can make a pretty educated guess that he's not going to be in the area. They control the space with vision, and then they secure the objective. So, yep, it's just kind of a consequence of all of the prior objectives. G2 kind of staying true to their game plan. Now, you would imagine that they turn their attention either towards Herald, which, of course, not alive yet, but it will be relatively soon, and they can then use that to try and break open the mid tower, or instead, they can just shift their control towards the top side and set their sights on the tier 1 outer tower.
And the thing is, because all the shifting has been through jungle support and AD carry on both sides, it's just been Caps free farming. So he's actually got it relatively good stacks up at the moment. Like, you still want to get the 2-2-5 is when the burn comes in, but he's still stacking incredibly quickly and will only start to stack faster as this game goes on. So I think GIANTX, they just haven't created enough pressure at the moment to really do anything against G2. So G2 are just happy to scale into a strong mid game.
Yeah, and what GIANTX did in the early game, getting Patrik that extra XP, trying to get him hyper-leveled, isn't really doing much because he's just matching Hansama in the mid lane. They both just clear the wave and then nothing happens, right? So across the board, G2 have had the benefit of the early game. The arrow there hitting onto IgNar. TP in as GIANTX are looking to dive at Cassante. Now, he does have the Crossfire Gauntlet and a Redemption, and even with the Nature's Grasp, I'm not sure he dies here. Gets the knockback, IgNar has to jump away. Yeah, okay, GIANTX, this was bloody awful. This was diabolical. GIANTX went for the dive, and all they're gonna do is die. Cass has so much free time in the top lane. The Lightning Crash coming out, Magnet Sword from IgNar as well, but BrokenBlade has already found 2 out of the fight. They're gonna make it 3. It's a disaster for GIANTX, and G2 happily eat up their rewards. IgNar trying to get away, but Hansama's here on the chase. IgNar has a flash, but I don't think he escapes from that. 6 nil for G2.
I think GIANTX just got too impatient. The idea there is the right one. You overstack bot, you commit to the tower, but they just didn't have a wave to play off. And they thought that by using the TP, they could stall the minion dying long enough to set up for the dive. But also, you're trying to dive a K'Sante who still had absolutely everything up. It was over-ambitious. They should have just waited for the next wave and traded towers. Instead, they overforced, they get collapsed on, and now they find themselves down 0-6 in kills.
This, to me, looks like G2 beat GX before they got onto the Rift. Like, GX are trying to overcomplicate things, overthink things, and this is, hey, we need this bot play to work out, so we're going to try and hard force it. But as you said on the call, Medic, like, it's very difficult to take down a K'Sante in this position. Your damage dealer isn't really there. And the rest of G2 are on the way as well, and you know they are because the Ashe arrow already came through, so it's just way too much from GX trying to overforce these things, and it feels like I don't know, this isn't the GIANTX that we would have seen in summer.
I mean, GIANTX have never had a good early game.
Yeah, but this is...
It's they're a team that, you know, you can criticize G2 for their early game performances for sure, but GIANTX are pretty much our worst early game team in the league, and it's decisions like this that really kind of put them in that deficit. The problem is, I think G2's just lane assignments and mid-game macro is at a very high level, and so they'll punish you for your poor lane assignments, and they're going to prove that right now by securing the final ladder tower. The gold is 7,000? 7,000. And, I mean, you look at the bottom of your screen, even Mikyx has a 1.4k gold lead over IgNar.
I'm sure Caps wishes he had a couple of those kills that Mikyx has picked up throughout the course of the game. Also on Bloodsong Braum, it is not something you see all the time, but it is quite aggressive. And I think in this sort of game state, it makes sense to be quite aggressive. As the support, G2 have taken all the tier 1s. There's a Drake for them if they want it. Inferno, they've now secured the Rift Herald as well. And a bunch of pings from GIANTX down towards that dragon. It feels odd to say maybe they make their final stand there at the 17-minute mark, but it does feel like if they're not able to win a fight in the next couple of minutes, this game's just going to get away from them.
You don't even have, you know, something close on the horizon that can try and set you up. Jackie's has only just completed the Blade of the Rune King. G2 starting to come in with second items, especially when you're looking at Caps as well, like moving up towards that second item. You're just so far behind here as GX, and now they're going to try and desperately set up this dragon, but does BB TP in, or did G2 let it go?
There's the TP behind. Daisy coming out as well as G2 want to take the fight. Keeper's verdict hits onto Yike, forces him away. Mikyx puts down the Unbreakable. Redemption coming out as well as BrokenBlade dives onto the backline. The Drake secured by Juhan. Hans trying to force Jackie's away and manages to do so. Cat's now opening up and the dive comes back in from the Antonio, but he'll fall first. Juhan trying to put some saplings down to slow G2 on their advance. In the end, it's a Drake for a kill. GIANTX taking the dragon.
GIANTX, they had a nice setup. G2 wanted to try and contest with a flanking TP. It's kind of comical how low the overall damage is this point in the game. These AD carries, sure, those one-item spikes definitely offering value, but you can see how, with these front lines being as strong as they are this early on, it's very slow to kill anyone, but a nice knockout of Yike meant that GIANTX could secure the objective. But look at how much they're conceding. The bot wave is being pushed in, mid pushed in as well. G2 now making their way towards the enemy camps, and Yike's going to steal that one away. Hans also going to be able to get himself the red buff just to add a bit of insult to injury. So in terms of map control, G2 definitely still the ones in control.
Yeah, and look, you can see the TP ward for BrokenBlade to come in. GIANTX just trying to steal this away as quickly as possible. But I think when you look towards the top half of this fight, Jackie's, the position that he had here was actually really strong because it forces Hans Sama to try and play up towards his top side with Patrik. So it's only Caps who's trying to decide which side of the fight he goes to, which then buys space for IgNar to get out. And it will end up being the Poppy that ends up dropping. But in the grand scheme of things, I think that diversion, essentially, that Jackie's and Patrik ran on the top side helped out in it securing the fact that G2 didn't know where to put their attention.
Still an 8,000 gold lead for G2, 19.5 minutes in. They could look for an early Baron if they want. Smolder, Ashe with an Ivern behind them will help them take that relatively quickly. Jackie's has the flash here. G2 starting to collapse. He's got one ward behind him, and I don't think Jackie's knows. As you can see, the Antonio struggling in terms of gold. Hans Sama has the redemption. The TP coming in as well by GIANTX, but the Antonio I'm sorry, mate. I'm not sure this is where you want to be today. The rest of his team are trying to collapse, but there's 2 tanks on their way, and immediately they decide not to join him in dying. There's 2 quick kills to G2.
Unfortunately, a symptom of a pervasive problem that we've continued to see of GIANTX is Jackie's getting caught in a sideline. It's happened multiple times in summer splits, an issue that we were hoping coming into season finals he was able to rectify, but when he finds himself at a deficit, he tries his best to get those resources, to funnel that farm back into himself, but he leaves himself exposed. And G2's a team that will not allow that to go unpunished. They find themselves a kill. They punish the TP from the Antonio. They get another tower. They're going to try and convert it into another one. And I mean, this game was already out of control, but it's going from bad to worse as G2 extend to a 10k gold lead 20 minutes in.
And the Baron's only just bloody spawned. At this stage, you're going to be stuck in your own bases, GIANTX. You've no hope of trying to contest this. G2 just kind of get to do whatever the hell they want, and you need some sort of miracle here from GIANTX to pick someone off, to find something to slow down the pace of this game. But with how far ahead G2 are, I feel like they just group as 5 and do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, smack them with your wallets at this point, right? You have the fat stacks, you might as well use them. The only good thing for GIANTX is Caps hasn't really been involved in most of the recent fights. Most of the time he's been pushing side lanes, so he's still only 188 stacks on the Smolder.
Yeah, and he's only 1.8k. Oh,
yeah, he's only 1.7k
k
ahead, right? He's basically a support in this position, but no. Caps will still do a huge amount of damage even without that execute. Remember, the execute doesn't scale anymore with the amount of stacks you have. As soon as you get to 225, I think it's a 6.5% max HP execute. Still very powerful, still something you're aiming for on the Smolder, but he has 2 items, he's got that 2k gold lead, and GIANTX really don't have a hope in hell of coming back into this one. G2 just denying as much vision, denying the camps, making sure there's as little gold on the map for GIANTX as possible.
I mean, from G2, this is a great macro game overall. They really did just punish the positional mistakes from GX, from start to finish. Now they'll start the Baron. A bit ambitious, you could argue, but they know they have the gold advantage. Why not force the fight?
Jack is going to TP in. Forward across the wall. Han Summit still on the Baron right now. They jump in with the root call, immediately they dive onto Juhan. He's pulled back, and in the middle of the redemption, he finds none. Patrik and IgNar forced away by Daisy. The Antonio does still have a flank position.
Man, the Antonio just went through right as the engage went off, and now G2 back in the pit. The Antonio needs the Poppycopter, but it's still not off cooldown.
He jumps forward with the Unbreakable. The Antonio now looking for that flank position. No smite for GIANTX. Keeper's verdict only hits onto the support. Patrik kept at bay by Daisy. Magnastorm forward. Maybe BrokenBlade will fall, but the Trigger C will keep him alive for just a second. Jackie's diving in, trying to take down Han Summit. He flashes and is met with an arrow to the face. The Antonio chased out by Caps. Patrik, the last man standing. There's a tree coming to try and help him out, but so far, GIANTX have only been going timber.
It won't be a deathless run for G2, but it's damn near perfection as GIANTX fall to the Baron. The Dragon is available for the taking. And I mean, we look back at this. G2 keep it simple. They know that they have the gold lead. They'll just convert it into the team fights. And they, of all the characters to catch, they catch out the enemy jungle, making the Baron that much easier to secure.
It's just perfect timing. They just see the Poppy go across the pit, and they're like, wait, it's just 4 versus 5 now. Great, let's look for the engage. And then here, sure, you get Mikyx, but the knockup comes through into Patrik, which means he's out of the equation. The Antonio just about manages to get BrokenBlade there, so it's something, but the cleanup crew is here for G2, and there's very little that GIANTX can do.
I think a lot of people expected this sort of result. I think the draft has not done GIANTX any favors. The lane squad didn't seem to do them any favors either. But only picking up 1 kill in game 1 is definitely demoralizing. G2 now grouped up as 5, pushing in this bottom side. 24 minutes on the clock. They have a 14,000 gold lead, but no melee minions, so they can't step any closer to this tower yet. It's the small things. You got to find those tiny bits of hope for GIANTX, but the next wave is now about to arrive. Control ward in the bush. As GIANTX decide, it seems to not engage as G2 push up towards that turret range. The inhibitor, the next target. What are reigning champions? The Antonio brings out the Poppycopter, knocks back 2, they'll go for Yike. The Magnastorm engaged into Nature's Grasp, and Yike will fall first. TP behind by BrokenBlade, but the rest of G2 are a mile away. Can BrokenBlade survive for a year? Yes, he can. Of course he can. He's Cassante. What am I talking about? He could survive on the fountain. For all it's worth right now, GIANTX go 1-for-1 in the trade in the end. G2 can still push forward. Hansama no flash. Patrik trying to put the damage down across the side, but can't find too much more.
TP flank coming in from the Antonio.
The inhibitor tower is going to be down before he can arrive to the battle. He'll look for Caps, he'll knock him back. BrokenBlade goes in, lightning crash from Jackie's. Is it enough? The Antonio already down. Juhan short to follow him. It's a quick trip to an early grave for GIANTX, and with the ammo connecting, it might be all done for G2. Only 2 Nexus towers stand in their way, Jackie's and IgNar. It would be a Herculean performance to pull this one off, but so far you'd be more like Sisyphus, constantly trying to make the plays, but that boulder keeps rolling back down in your face. G2 will close it out. Jackie's and IgNar forced back to the fountain. Jackie doesn't even find solace there. 18 kills to 2, 26 minutes on the clock, 17,000 gold ahead. I think G2 may be angry today.
That was a demolition from G2. From start to finish, they get the early lead. They refuse to let up. 8 kills onto Hansama. Caps eventually decided to get involved in the fights, but he wasn't needed. G2 had it handled the whole way through.
It was a one-sided affair, and GIANTX are going to have to rapidly go back to the drawing board as we head to a break. We'll see you in a bit for Game 2.
Oh man, I feel like that was my best intro ever.
Yeah, not bad, hey, not bad.
Talented.
I can go pro. You know it as well. I also know you can dance. You should join me next time. And yes, I feel like you've also deserved a bit of a break. You've earned it.
Thanks.
Even the biggest champ needs a break.
Good job.
Hey, thank you.
Red Bull gives you wings.